Okay, this is part two now of self-assertion. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to emphasize how important feelings are for everyone to be able to acknowledge and determine whether or not they should actually express them. So just a couple of quick questions, though, that relate to, say, men's feelings, for instance. Are men's feelings any different than a woman's feelings? And do our feelings actually grow as we mature? Do they change? No to both questions, because feelings stay the same. The way you cried at age 2 is probably just as intense as the way you're crying at 22, 42, 52. Emotions never change. It's how we deal with them and whether we can use logic and reason to determine whether or not our actions are appropriate. And as far as men's feelings, a man is no different emotionally than a woman. The problem with self-expression lies in how a culture, and not necessarily just the American culture, actually shapes or misshapes a man's self-image and his expectations about how he, quote, should behave. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Let's look at origins. Where does dependence and passivity actually originate? Obviously, it starts at the home. If we are taught, don't talk back to me, you're a bad child, don't ever do this, well, you start to equate badness with rejection. And so you're not going to run the risk of being rejected by mommy or daddy. So you put a lid on it. But what happens as you get older? You taught yourself the expression of anger is not healthy. I shouldn't do it. My partner will reject me, or somebody won't like me. So now I'm 35, 45, whatever, and I don't have the tools to be able to say what I really want to say. And it would be appropriate to do so. So beliefs also have something to do with that. If family says nobody in the family talks back, so this is a shared belief that it is not right to speak up and say how you feel. And that also is, if we are going to share the family's values, belief system, this gets tricky because this is part of identity. Your identity is really contingent upon your contact with your feelings. If your feelings are kind of unclear to you, that means that your perception of yourself is also kind of fuzzy. And certainly it's going to mean that your perception of others. Others could be your family, your partner, your children even, will also be just as unclear. So if the values of your family are that we go to church every Sunday, and you're starting to question the existence of God, do you say anything? Do you continue to go to church to make the family happy? And you're sitting there being uncomfortable. You're listening to all this talk from the Bible and this and that. Do you dare not speak up and say how you feel? Fear of conflict is understandable. Conflict is not pleasant, but it is part of reality. And if we do not know that we have the right to address it, as I said earlier, implosion is an inevitable outcome and a very dangerous one. So now, one thing too, if you were brought up with this family values, beliefs, and you're thinking, well, they made me believe this way, and they told me I shouldn't do this, and slow down and don't blame parents for what you failed to do, okay? Everybody, including myself, we were all brought up maybe with ideals that were valuable to mommy and daddy, but as we get older, maybe they don't resonate with the same delight that the parents are still holding on to. So the real question is, what are you actually doing to assert what you need? It means, are you going to date somebody of a different ethnicity or the same gender? You're going to go in the closet, come out of the closet? You have to start to assert how you are different maybe from your family and what you may share in common in order to keep that kind of communication open. I remember reading about some kid who was going to divorce his parents. I don't know what the outcome was, but it's kind of farcical because we can still separate ourselves from family and not have to actually reject them outright and just dismiss them as though they're not important in our lives, because they are. They are still human beings. And the ability to forgive our parents, maybe for the mistakes they made, will be a great, noble achievement. We have to look at where are they coming from? What kind of a background, what kind of severe beliefs may have been part of their upbringing that they are contributing to my misery today? So you decide, am I an extension of mommy and daddy's values, or am I somebody who's maybe a little different from what they believe in? Our culture, this is a tricky culture. The American culture, we don't necessarily encourage the expression of feelings. We are image. We want to look good. We want to be sexy. You have to be young, beautiful, handsome, have lots of money, fancy car, great figure, tremendous sex appeal. But the problem, none of those things are necessarily bad in and of themselves. But the problem is we start to devote a great deal of time, energy, and even money into building this image at the price of our feelings. So when it's time to express ourselves, we're just maybe a hollow image, and we don't have the tools, never mind the rights, to be able to speak up and say what we should. We have become almost, let's put it this way. We're a culture that has functional blow-up dolls. What does that say? That is scary. So let's go back right now then to some of the other issues that underlie our own inability to assert. In the book, I have talked about how self-care is different from selfishness. Self-care sort of lies under the line or the realm of need, form of self-protection. Let me give you an example, actually, of something I just had recently. I take the commuter train into Boston. There's a lady, she and I often chit-chat because we both like to get off the train early and head for the subway. Now, this lady's about twice my height. That means her legs are twice as long as mine, and she walks fast. Anyway, through the last several months, I've been kind of galloping to keep up with her as we head for the subway. And then last week, I thought, this has got to end. This is not good. Now, I'm not going to tell her, lady, can you slow down and keep up with me? And I'm not going to keep putting myself in this uncomfortable position. And so I said, no. I got to think of a nice way to say this. She's tall. Maybe when she was in the 8th grade, maybe she was probably taller than the guys. So I want to downplay her height. She's very pretty, very feminine today, but who knows what kind of sensitivity still may lurk there. So I figured humor is still one of the best ways to try to approach a problem. So I said to her as we started the gallop, the marathon to the subway, I said, hang on a second, thinking maybe in the next lifetime I'm going to be as tall as you are. But right now, I'm really kind of tiny, and it's hard for me to keep up with you. So why don't you go on ahead, all right? She kind of smiled and chuckled, and that was that. And I thought, oh, God, maybe the next time she sees me, she'll be kind of a little bit insulted, or who knows. I said, but I have to be able to stop doing this. I'd be out of breath by the time I got to the subway. I said, this isn't right. I cannot make somebody else feel okay if they have no idea how I feel. So as I said, humor can be very effective. And by the way, she was fine the next times that I would see her. And we have to take the risk. The fear of confrontation is legitimate. We do not know exactly how somebody is going to react to what we say or do. That's a very normal fear of the unknown. We have to take those chances, but by anticipating consequences and by having that consideration of how somebody else is going to feel, what are their rights, what are their needs, what might be their feelings, that will facilitate us in being able to bring, hopefully, the best possible solution. And again, guys, there is nothing perfect in life. Everybody is a little different. Everybody can misperceive, misinterpret what it is you're trying to say or do. Life isn't perfect. Therapy isn't perfect. We do the best we can. I'm giving some tools that helped me as I was struggling to find and really refine my own identity through the years. And for that reason, wish I could handle this YouTube thing a little bit better. I feel that it's good to give some little opportunities for viewers who may be still stuck in time. So another point to look at are boundaries. A boundary, in my opinion, is sort of like an invisible line between me and others. So are you somebody who could fall in love with a stranger in about 15 minutes? Let me give you another quick example of a situation. Many years ago, I've been a teacher also of psychology, and I had a student, this woman who during breaks always liked to get a little free therapy. And I was like, okay, whatever. Well, then after school, who's at the train station heading back home, but this student, she sees me and she says, "Oh," she says, "we can get caught up." And I smiled and said to myself, that's what you think. Anyway, we chit-chatted. They announced you can board the trains and okay, this and that. As we got on the platform and got into the car, I said to her, you can sit over there and I'm going to sit over there. She was livid on her face, didn't say a word. And I sat there thinking, you showed no consideration for my feelings, that maybe I wanted to take a nap, eat an apple, correct papers. Now, maybe if she had said, "May I ask you a personal question?" I might have given her a little time. But when somebody shows you no consideration, you really owe them nothing. And that's an important point. I set that line, you've gone too far. I'm not on school time. I'm away from the classroom. You're on my turf. At this time, that means I call the shots. None of this had to be said. It's in your actions that real assertive power takes place. You end up with the last word. Now, the ability to say no, I was 46 before I could say no. And that really stinks because you resent the other person who you should be saying no to, and you end up resenting yourself. So one of the most important points to actually remember is that you better have a good, strong backbone when you are expressing no, because people are not going to like you. And if you are a people pleaser needing to be liked, you're probably always going to keep saying yes when you should be saying no. But no really starts to really define exactly who you are and who you are not. I had a student, again, years ago. She said that on her final, the question was, what did you learn in this class? She said, I finally learned to speak up. She said, I used to drive people around to the markets. I'd sit outside while they shopped. Nobody offered me gas or alternative rides. She said, I listened to students in the class. I listened to you at the books. And she said, when I finally told them I can't do this anymore, most of them were gone. Only one person remained. But she ended up liking herself more, gaining more dignity, self-esteem, and power. That's a lot, just from saying that one little word no. So that feels good. So now let me wind down with some tips, because I can see the clock is ticking. One thing that you have to remember is that if you choose to actually do nothing because you assessed the outcome, that still is actually being assertive. And another thing that I'll actually bring up later when I do a self-esteem video is that try to shift. If you hear yourself often saying, I wonder what they think of me, try to shift it to, what do I think of them? And that can bring power back to you. And the two last things that I had said were, remember, you are responsible for your actions, not your feelings. And the most important point is this: if you do not deal with your feelings, they will deal with you. And that is scary, and that's good. You should be scared. So learn how to get in touch with those feelings. I think I'm going to wind down now. And I'm going to be talking about food abuse in the next video next week. That means if you are notoriously rejecting food, or if you are using food to stuff because you're not dealing with your emotions, maybe this particular video could be helpful for you. We'll see. One last thing, too. If you've been in therapy for 5 years and you've gone nowhere, get a new therapist because you're buying time. If you've got an intellectual appreciation for more knowledge, but there's no real progress, be careful. The therapist may be making a buck off of you, and you're just buying the illusion of growth. Okay. I think I'll wind down now. So stay tuned.